Welcome to another episode of Blissonomics, where we help you discover, define, and monetize your bliss. Today, I have the ultimate pleasure of interviewing Terrie Schauer, who is a recent author with her new book coming out in a couple of months called The Mindful Landlord. Now, I've had the pleasure of reading Terrie's book before everyone else did, aside from the publisher, of course. And I can tell you the book is so much more than about real estate or landlording. It's about a new way of being in business. And we're ready for this type of message. I mean, there's plenty of books on real estate, there's plenty of books on mindfulness, but these two subjects come together in such a beautiful way. We're going to be discussing that more today. Before we jump into the interview, though, I would like to interview Terrie. Now, Terrie has so many accomplishments that I can't even read these off the top of my head. I actually have a bio that I have to read, so I make sure that I mention everything that's so wonderful about Terrie. After 20 years managing rental properties and investing, Terrie Schauer knows how real estate can lead to financial freedom. She coaches and speaks to guide others on this same path. She holds monthly real estate workshops for investors. Her blog offers tips and advice on the subject. She holds a PhD from Fraser University in communications. She has a master's from Oxford and a BA in philosophy from the University of Toronto. Now, if that wasn't enough, she also is an athlete who won in 2018 the Nogi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Championship as a purple belt, and now is the best-selling author of Mindful Landlord. Wow. I think you could just take the day off now, Terrie. I mean, so I have these amazing questions that I want to ask you, and I really want to give listeners the opportunity to get to know you and the opportunity to get into your head a little bit about how this book came along, why you feel that now is the time to educate people on this and to share your experience, to share your life. So my first question for you is, the word mindfulness gets used a lot today. What do you mean when you use that word, mindfulness?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lisa. So mindfulness has a history that comes through Buddhism. And I guess, in my personal experience in the martial arts, I became interested in Buddhism, I guess 15 years ago when I started, reading different stuff, practicing a bit of meditation myself. And so mindfulness really has to do with how lucid you are about what's going on for yourself. So it's obviously, kind of the tropes that we have in popular culture of slowing down, being more aware of the things that you do with your time, with your mind. But really, it's a question of taking stock of your mental habits and becoming aware of what it is that you do with your mind. And that then influences, obviously, your actions, how you are in the world, how you react to things. And as you become, let's say, more lucid and more clear on your own modes of functioning, it becomes easier to change your habits, to be in the world in a different way. And you really then gain a lot of power in terms of how you're being in the world. And obviously you also become conscious of stuff that maybe you didn't see before. So
Right.
some of it has to do with, your own internal workings, but then it also has to do with your relationship with the external world, your relationship with reality. So yeah. Pretty much that's it.
And you talk about meditation. Did meditation come easy to you? Like, how did you first decide to, today I'm going to meditate because I know that there's an ROI in meditating, right? 'Cause you're extremely busy. You are a single mom. So not only do you have these businesses, you're an author, you're, a student of life. There's just so much going on. So when did you decide, I'm going to try this meditating thing?
Yeah, well, funny story. So 25-year-old Terrie wasn't Terrie now.
Right.
Really struggled with some anxiety when I was younger. And, I went to, go talk to some professionals about that. I was really not happy with the way in which our culture tends to medicalize negative emotion.
Right.
So get anxiety or depression. And it was kind of in that moment that I happened onto Pema Chodron, who is like a pretty famous Buddhist writer, and then followed that course as kind of a way to deal with my anxiety. And then that ended up kind of how can I say, having implications through the whole way that I was living my life.
Right.
And then I became more conscious of, my mental habits, realizing how I was trapping myself in kind of negative behavior patterns or negative ways of thinking. And that really, like, that was how I was feeding this anxiety. So let's say a meditation practice helped kind of bring me more into my body and just like slow down a little bit. But that goes with a whole mental training package or a way of thinking that supports the meditation. So, and I then start to look at it as kind of like, if I'm training, I'm going to go spend a certain amount of time in the gym.
Right.
And I make sure that every day, whatever my spiritual practice is, it's evolved since it was just meditation, but that I look at that as, going to the weight room and lifting weights. Like, I need to spend that time engaged in a spiritual practice every day. And it's still something that I do now.
And it makes such a difference because, I mean, aside from your busy life, in work, in landlording, not every day is a beautiful day. So if you wake up with all this stuff in your head, by the time you face the public, you face your clients, you face, anyone, traffic, you have to start from this foundation of clarity. Right? Yeah. Because the days pile on to each other. And by the time you get to Friday, it's fetal position, Friday fetal position, right? If you don't have some kind of practice. So how is Mindful Landlord different from other real estate books?
Yeah. So I guess as I moved through a little bit of the real estate education industry, I started seeing that there was a lot of kind of 1980s, 1990s, bigger is better. Kind of attitude out there. So a lot of the books and even the educational material that exists is very much more deals, more money, more leverage, more. And as I kind of moved through, that was my starting point when I started out in real estate. I was looking, up to people who were making more money than me, owned more doors than me, had more transactions. And I was in this kind of vibe of let's grow. And then I had my son. And then I sort of thought, okay, what is this really about? And is it about having more doors, more money, more leverage? Or is it really about knowing what you want real estate to be for you, knowing how much is enough for you, and then stopping once you get there? Right. And making sure that you're taking a balanced journey and not sacrificing all the things that end up feeding into like a balanced, happy, and not ultimately selfish life, that because part of our being in the world is obviously what we want to take out of it, but part of it is also who are we being for everyone else? When you have children, when you have tenants, when you have other people that you interact with, like, you're responsible for what you put out into the world. And if you're a stress case who's trying to make $3 million a year and all you're putting out is negativity, you're going to be reaping a lot of what that brings back to you as well, as in addition to putting it out onto other people. So,
and I mean, that was the whole basis of starting Blissonomics, is finding the bliss in the economics, right? Is finding that sweet spot where you take the responsibility, and I say responsibility because it's a big thing to design the life that you want to design, right? So was there a pivotal moment? Was there a moment where you threw your bag into the car and said, that's it, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. I can't live like this.
Yeah. Well, I think I really had two moments like that. And I would say the first one came, when I was 25 and I found myself, I was studying at university. I was kind of just living a life that my community and my parents put me on a certain track, and I'm very grateful for the upbringing that I had, but it pushed me in directions that wasn't necessarily right for me. Like at 25, I knew that I wanted to have my own business, and I knew that I wanted to devote a lot of my time to excelling as an athlete. And that wasn't really something that was valued in the context that I grew up in. And so I found myself, on this track to be a professor and working in academia. And it really didn't reflect who I was, And then through meditating, through reading a bunch of Buddhist stuff, working with some of the ideas, I kind of gained the confidence to say, okay, you know what? I have one life, and I'm not going to spend it trying to write someone else's narrative, trying to act out a plan that someone gave me. I'm going to really follow my dreams, So I think that was the first moment, at 25. And then I kind of had a moment where I moved to France. I finished my PhD and left everything behind me, decided I'm not going to get an academic job. I'm going to work in real estate, and I'm going to go and compete in martial arts with my time. So that was kind of the first moment. And then the second moment happened when I had my son, and I began to see how this mortgaging everything to bigger and better, be it more medals, more money, whatever external signs of achievement, if you sacrifice everything to that, you're not having the full human experience, first of all, for yourself, and you're not able to be there for other people in a way that's constructive. So, it's kind of those two things. One is the learn to follow your dreams. And then once you've been on that ride for a while, then you realize, okay, well, is it really about those external markers of success? Is it about the size of your bank account? Is it about the number of medals you have? Or is it the way in which you're being in your sport or being in your, economic activity, whatever it is you're trying to get good at? So
it's amazing that you had that awareness at 25 years old. Most people only get there, Terrie. I'm telling you, most people only get there in their 40s and their 50s when they realize that something is wrong, but they can't necessarily pinpoint what it is for them. Right. So that midlife crisis, or you had a quarter life crisis, another kudos.
Midlife crisis at 25.
We call that a quarter life crisis. And kudos to those people who have them, because they're in the prime of their life. I mean, I'll argue that 50 is the prime of your life as well. But to have that awareness before it escalated into something even bigger is wonderful. And it's even more wonderful that with this book, you're getting to teach other people to just be open, right? Which leads me to my next question. There's a lot of it's these days, these ideas are like a bit airy-fairy. How do your readers take this what they might think is airy-fairy mindfulness and put it into action?
Okay. So again, I'm going to give you two answers there.
Yeah.
I think the first one, I read this great book, and I'm not going to remember the author right now, but it's a book, I think it's called Incremental Change, or something about how change happens in increments.
Okay.
And if you, start a diet plan or start a workout plan and you think that you're going to get results within 24 hours, that's just not how things work. Mm-hmm. It works where you're, let's say, eating 100 calories less every day, or where you're, running or walking for an extra 10, 15 minutes. And slowly, month over month, year over year, you begin to see those changes in your life that will transform you over a long period of time. And I think this is one way in which our culture does a huge disservice. You see someone's Instagram account and you think that within 24 hours they became an overnight success, but the overnight success took 10 years. I'll be honest, as far as, in competing in sports, I started when I was 25. I won my first world championship last year at 40 years old. It took me 15 years of showing up every single day, eating the right things, training with the right people. And it really, I lost my first fights. I lost a lot of fights at the beginning, just like everybody else who gets good at anything. If you're in it for 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, whatever it takes, it's that kind of incremental, tiny little bit of things that ends up. And the same is true in financial life. And then the other thing I would say is, so in the Mindful Landlord book, there's a lot of these ideas are presented kind of in a, theoretical way, or in a way that you can read them. We're also going to release a workbook that goes along with the book launch that gives people 10 practical exercises that they can go through to, put that in relationship a little bit more with their lives. I certainly know for myself in martial arts, I can hear something, if I hear something explained, it sometimes goes in one ear and out the other. Mm-hmm. But whereas if you force me to do it, I'm going to kind of learn kinetically. And I think that in terms of applying some of these ideas, it really takes, sit down with a calculator, write down some figures, analyze what you're doing, or else physically do some mindfulness exercises. And then that's going to open those doors for you that maybe reading ideas off a page or listening to them in a podcast might not.
And that's definitely a great idea, because it puts the onus on the reader also to take these action steps, and it gives them some context, because when you're reading a book, you're trying to relate your story or your own story to, if I was reading it, to my own story, and I find some similarities in there. But when I actually have the opportunity to do the exercises, then there's real meat in there. We're not working with my stuff, right? I'm not just reading about your successes, but I also have the opportunity by doing the exercises to learn in context so that I can start creating my incremental successes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. I'm eager to see that out in the world as well. Speaking of the world, our world is going through a lot of changes right now. AI, social media, rapid technology changes, problems with the environment. How do you see real estate investing developing over the next few decades?
Yeah. So I just read this great book by Yuval Harari, 21 Questions for the 21st Century. And I think that really brings into perspective how we are like perched on the edge of a cliff with the way and the speed in which our world is going to start changing.
So exciting.
One of the things that he brings up is really, our relationship to work and how what we're able to do with automation, with AI, that people's relationship to work, like I would say in the next 10, 15 years, we're going to see that our society is not going to need everybody to be working 9 to 5 at the rate that we're working at now. So that has something to do with how we spend our time, like how we develop ourselves through leisure. I think we're going to, in the next amount of time, have maybe more openings on that. But I think on the flip side, there's also our relationship to how we make money and how we are in the world economically. And I think as we look forward into the future, personally, it seems important to think what is not replaceable by a machine, okay? Mm-hmm. In terms of looking at what we invest our money in and how we educate ourselves. And I think with real estate, people are always going to need to live somewhere. Land is always going to have worth. And even if, let's say, your job as a, whatever it is, computer programmer or a cashier or even a real estate agent, I think a lot of those professions are going to be either replaced or we're going to see our hours cut with what's going on. But if you're able to position yourself as a landlord or get into the real estate industry, that's going to be an economic zone that I think is going to travel pretty well across time, because people are always going to need to live somewhere and they're always going to need apartments. And that's then not going to tie, let's say, your economic fortunes to what's going on with the job market. So.
And you bring up an interesting point about there's going to be more time and more time and value placed on leisure, because I was in corporate in the 80s and the 90s. The 80s, am I that old? And at the beginning of the late 80s, I should say, in my early entrance. But you were your position, right? You were, even still to this day, you are what you do. And I'm looking forward to a time and a space where it's not only about that. It's really about what you contribute to the world. And I know that that's so important to you as well. So I think this is a very exciting time that we live in. I couldn't have said that in the 80s and the 90s. But with books like yours, Mindful Landlord, it's really opening the space. I mean, people, like you say, still learned about real estate in the 80s, in the 90s, and it was that go, 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 go kind of mentality, right? And they're I can't say everyone's unhappy. I mean, to some degree, there's some unhappiness there, but this is one of the first books that I see in the real estate world where it's giving you something else to think about, that maybe this is the cause of your unhappiness. Maybe another 100 doors is not going to, is not going to make or break you. I mean, how much money do people really, really need if it's at the expense of their family, at the expense of their health, of their mental health, and the time they get to spend doing the things that they absolutely love? So again, exciting times, and I think that your book is bringing us there. So what are the top pieces of advice for someone who's in this market that you would like to share?
So like the top pieces of advice for people who would want to get into real estate investing?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I would say the first thing that I see, or like let's say a little bit level of confusion that people have at the beginning, is just the importance of what's called passive income. So when you are engaged in active income, what that means is that your hours that you work are tied to the amount of money that you make. So very simply, an employee who, let's say, works for 15, 20, even $50 an hour,
Right.
If you're paid hourly, that's active income. And the ceiling on the amount of money you can make is going to be determined by the amount of hours you have to sell. So that's like pretty kind of simple equation. Most people who have jobs realize that, unless, even if they start working 80 hours a week, well, the number of hours that you have in a week to sell times your hourly rate, that's the most money you can make. Okay, so people kind of see that might not be the best deal.
Right.
But then where it
There's
gets
a ceiling. There's a definite ceiling on that.
Absolutely. But then where I think people get a little bit confused is when we move into, let's say, transactional income. So who's, let's say, a real estate agent, or who sells cars, or who does high value transactions, if you have to do something, like if you have to get up and shovel in the morning to produce the money that you make, that's still active income.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, a lawyer who has a really high hourly rate, or a real estate agent who makes, I don't know, whatever, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 on a sale, that money is still dependent on the number of hours that they get up to do every morning. And so passive income of the type that you would make by being a landlord, by owning rental property, like in that case, you're really divorcing those two things. Whether I get to bed in the morning or not, my tenants are still paying their rent.
That's right.
Of course, I'm still going to have, some management stuff that I'm going to need to take care of. And there is like there's no such thing as really truly 100% passive income, but you can have that time investment portion become very small. So I think getting clear about what is active income and what is passive income, especially when you're looking at, things in the real estate industry, like flipping or, wholesaling or whatever that kind of stuff is, like that's still active income in a way. So I think maybe we'll get to that a little bit later on, but I think really being clear about what the difference is between passive and active income, and that, you want to get into investing because it's going to give you access to that passive income stream that's going to slowly decrease over time the number of hours you need to spend actively making money.
And I'm hoping there's going to be those type of exercises in the action in book, right?
Yes,
okay,
for sure.
So those are the things that we're going to be able to do to use our own life as an example to differentiate between the active and the passive income. Yeah. That's in there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so go ahead.
So yeah, and I would just to go back to answer the question, I would add one more thing to that. And that's what I call hero of your own life.
Right.
So, in a sense, whether it's in real estate or whether it's anything else you're doing, you need to make sure that whatever narrative you're living out is one that you're authoring. So if you're in real estate investing because you heard it somewhere in a seminar, or because your father did it, or your brother did it, or your brother-in-law thinks it's a good idea, not the best reason to be doing anything. And I think before we launch down a specific path of, okay, I'm going to try and, succeed at doing this specific thing, we need to be clear that that's really part of our own journey. And as you write the story, you write your own obituary, as you say, where do I want to be at the end of this? Is real estate really on that path? And if it is, more power to you, go. If not, well, then think about what it is that you really want to be. What narrative do you want to be living out with your life?
That's interesting. Writing your own obituary and reverse engineering it.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Because it's such a slippery slope when we, you saved yourself from academia, but it's such a slippery slope when we decide to do the things that we think people expect from us. And it happens everywhere at every age. Just because you decided to follow your own path, in your 20s, successfully, you stayed on that path, but some people might be swayed to, when you hit failures in your life, it's just another opportunity to try something else. But unfortunately, when people hit those failures, they think, okay, well, there's nothing I can come up with that's going to make me successful. Let me explore a bunch of things, and then suddenly these people find themselves in these traps of, oh, I think this is a great idea. Or look at all these people who are really,
Yeah.
really successful in real estate. It doesn't mean real estate is for you, as you know, because you come across, tons of people in all the networking that you do. And with your meetup group, people who are, really curious, but it doesn't mean that it's for them.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we were talking about flipping properties. What do you think about flipping properties for profit?
Yeah. So I think, any of these kind of active strategies, because that's what they are in the real estate industry. And I think like the real estate education right now is doing people a big disservice by not making those distinctions. And I think
Yes.
that be it flipping, be it wholesaling, be it rent to own deals, those are ways in which you can make money in the real estate industry, the same as being a mortgage broker or as being a real estate broker. And sometimes those manipulations or those transactions that you can do in that way have big price tags attached to them. And so people are, excited that as an agent, you could make a 10K commission, or in a flip, you could make 40, 50K. It's
Right.
true. You can also lose 40, 50K.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when one explores those, more active transactional things that you can do in the real estate industry, first of all, they should be considered as active income. So if you have a day job right now that's providing you with a certain amount of money, don't be flippant about that. Like, presumably you got a degree, you studied for some years, you worked your way up in some kind of an organization. Without realizing it, probably you have 5, 10, 15 years of experience in that. If
Mm-hmm.
you wake up tomorrow morning and decide, okay, I'm going to start flipping houses, how much experience do you have in construction? How
Mm-hmm.
much do you know? How much experience do you have working in the real estate market? Like, that's not a decision to be made lightly, especially not when
Right.
you're gambling at a table with $40,000, $50,000. That's a lot of money.
It
So
is. And these reality TV shows, Terry, they just grab you, right? And they make it seem so easy, and everybody's so good looking on these shows. And they're, they can do it all. They can do the decor, they can do the staging, and they can do the construction, and it's like nothing to pull a bathroom apart. And and look, this is what we did in like seemingly 3 minutes. Like it is actually not the
exactly,
reality.
exactly.
And you talk about somebody who has a career, right? So they're at that career, they're working those hours, and then at night they're spending their time in this, this empty house that they've just gutted, and they don't have, they don't have experience in real estate. They don't have experience. They don't have experience in construction. They don't have experience in so many things. So that $40,000-$50,000, pot of gold that they think that is waiting for them in the end comes at a very high price tag, right?
Yeah.
If it's ever going to be there. And I've heard of a lot of success stories. I've also heard of, people close to me who have lost that. So I think that you have to have, I mean, I am not in real estate, but what I've seen is there has to be some experience there. And in going into these transactions, they need to know that they're active, like you said, right? They're not passive. Now, I had a question because you mentioned wholesaling a couple of times. I think people are quite familiar with, landlording and flipping, but what is wholesaling?
Okay. So wholesaling it's almost like brokering a real estate deal. Okay. So in Canada, like, our real estate boards are pretty, how can I say, strict about you being allowed to act as an intermediary for a sale. So for example, I have my broker's license, so I can, get a house under contract and then put it on MLS and then broker a deal between two people. So as a real estate agent, I'm allowed to do that. Wholesaling is kind of a way of getting around that, in the sense that, for example, if I am not a real estate agent, what I will do is I will go and make an offer on a house. Okay. It's going to be probably a low offer. And then I'm going to sell that offer to someone else. So the idea is that as an intermediary, I'm going to, get a house that's called under contract. I'm going to make a sale contract. And in that contract, I'm going to write Terrie Schauer offers to buy this house, or assigned. And that then allows to assign that sale to someone else. And then usually what you will do is you'll do kind of an active arbitrage. So let's say I will offer, I'll say whatever, like I'll offer $200K for something, and then I will sell that to an investor for $210,000. And so I'm kind of doing the arbitrage in between the two. And so the idea is, if I know a lot of investors and I'm good at finding deals, I can insert myself as an intermediary, almost in a bit in the way that a broker would do, except you're putting yourself a little bit more in the line of fire because you're the one who's taking on that contract yourself. So,
and unlike landlording, that's still transactional. That's still active.
That's correct, because you have to go out, you have to find those deals, and then you have to network with your investors to pass them on. So it's basically like exactly the same work almost as a real estate agent would do.
Okay. And people do this all over the world.
People do it all over the world. In Canada, like, it's a little bit of a gray zone because our real estate boards do, how can I say, they're quite strict about who can do brokerage operations. And so this is a little bit playing with that, but it's technically, from what I know, it's still legal if you structure it in a certain way.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. Learn something all the time. So you talk about financial freedom in your book. How much money do you need to be financially free? Everyone's talking about financial freedom, right? Is there a dollar value on that?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting question. There's been a lot of studies done on this. And I mean, the actual textbook definition of financial freedom is that once your passive income covers your expenses, you are financially free. So if I live in a cabin somewhere with no off the grid, and my expenses are $5,000 a year, if I have $5,000 worth of passive income, I'm technically financially free. Okay. So that's like the textbook definition of financial freedom, is just that your passive income covers your expenses, your living expenses. Now, that's a little bit simplistic because, you know, there's a whole range of lifestyles, right? All the way from the person who lives in a cabin to somebody who is able to consume like $500,000 in a year.
Right.
And this is where some of those happiness studies, I find, like, if you put those two pieces together, it becomes really interesting. So in North America, the happiness number is somewhere around 75K.
Right.
So they have discovered that after you hit the 75K mark, your experiential happiness doesn't necessarily go up anymore. Okay. So that means that once you hit that bar, if you make $100,000 or $150,000, the things that you have to sacrifice to get to that level of income actually start detracting from your level of daily happiness. So basically, like, I think most people, for most of us, we could sort of start calculating with that number and saying that that's a reasonable goal to say, if I can get to 75K of passive income, by most conventional measures, I should be able to be financially free. What's actually interesting is what happens over that 75K mark. There's a different happiness indicator, which is called reported happiness, that goes up. Mm-hmm. And so what this is it's really saying how we compare ourselves to other people.
Right.
So let's say if I earn $200,000, I'm going to feel like I'm doing that much better in terms of my peers, and my reported happiness will go up, even though every morning when I get out of bed, my level will be saturated.
So that's your intrinsic happiness. Sorry, your extrinsic happiness.
Yeah, well, it's the way they frame it is it's called reported happiness and experienced happiness. So experienced happiness, every morning I put like a little happy face on my calendar. Am I feeling happy or sad today? That is experienced happiness. And reported happiness is how happy am I with my life in general? How well am I doing in life in general? And that is responsive to higher incomes because it's how we feel like we're doing in response to our peers.
Right. So just on a personal note, do you think that, you know, when we were talking about trends and those 21 questions, how do you think that's going to come into play? Do you think that number is going to be different in 10 years from now? It's curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough question, because I know there have been studies done on this, for example, with, you know, television and the way in which sitcoms, like they take the example of the sitcom Friends. Mm-hmm. So when you see that, like in Friends, I think a couple of them are working as waitresses in New York or whatever, and then you see the apartment that they live in, and there's no way that on a waitress's apartment salary you could afford that crazy apartment in downtown New York.
Right.
And I think when you look at what television did and what's being continued in social media is that the bar of what we expect for ourselves is just being constantly raised and raised and raised. So now on Instagram, you know, you can watch people in yachts and the lifestyle of the rich and famous. Like, I think that that's creating this kind of consumer demand of making us believe that a certain lifestyle or certain possessions are really what's going to bring you happiness. And that's then what fuels this more kind of drive.
And we almost expect it, the kids are looking at that.
Yeah.
And whereas, when I grew up, the rich and famous was so detached, it was, oh, that exists. Where now is the kids are looking at that and they're thinking, well, I mean, it must be easy if everybody has it. If everybody's doing it, must be really easy. And it's going to be interesting where we go from here.
But I'm really expecting that there's going to be a bit of a pendulum swing the other way.
There has to be, and we see that now. We see that now with people's openness talking about mental health, right? And we have our Brene Browns and our Mel Robbins and the women out there who are really leading the path on transparency, and that's why, again, I love your book, because it's opening us up to that transparency. That there's so many people in real estate, again, who are feeling this nudge of, there has to be something more. This is an exciting business, and it could be so much more exciting if we could just have the opportunity through a book like yours to be open to looking at a different way of being in this business. Yeah, you just don't see it just yet, but how it's
no, but it's coming, I think. Yeah. And then like the flip side of that, the Instagram visual is, what is that person's day like, or how happy they inside their yacht, or whatever this is, like it's very nice to have, a sort of a visual facade and say this looks very nice from the outside, but what is the reality of, like, let's say a broker who earns $400K a year? What is their reality? Like, are they getting up in the morning and having like 7 shots of espresso at 6 a.m. to be able to go till 10 o'clock at night? Is that the life that you want? It's not because they can afford a yacht that necessarily you want their life.
No, absolutely not. And when I say you don't see it yet, I'm talking about your book, the change and the lives that it's going to affect when people understand the value in it, the value of those two pieces coming together in a different way of being in their life. Yeah. So in your opinion, do you think people should invest in real estate?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that the biggest, like, sort of middle class trap that a lot of our culture conditions us to fall into is this active income trap. So
right.
You end up working as an employee, even if you have quite a nice salary. I mean, you're giving half of that money to the government, first of all, if you live in Canada, paying with all your things out of after tax dollars, maybe buying a single family home, and basically having to work until you're 65, 9 to 5, in something that maybe you're not in love with.
Right.
To afford that lifestyle. And I think that in looking at real estate as one vehicle for getting a handle on that passive income that's going to maybe free you from some of that, there are others. But this happened for me through real estate. And I think that, pretty much for anybody who's got a bit of money saved up or who has some borrowing capacity, like 100%, I think getting into the market as a landlord, it's kind of low risk. And it's the kind of thing that over time is only going to have a positive effect on your financial situation.
Right. So I was at your website, and after asking you that question, I was thinking about all the resources that are at your website. And you have this amazing quiz to figure out, actually, I'll let you explain it.
Okay. Yeah. So that's it. So kind of in looking at what stops people from getting into real estate investing, right. Over my 20 years in the industry, I've begun to see the way in which people kind of self-sabotage and stop themselves from moving forward to, let's say, acquire their first income property or get into landlording. And I came to find that those barriers that people face fall into a number of categories. And so that could be either one, I would say almost the most common one, is people don't know where to start. Mm-hmm. So they are in front of this, the real estate industry. They don't know exactly what are the first steps. What should I do? What do I need to do? And then they get kind of paralyzed. They get dough in the headlights. They freeze. They think, oh, this is too complicated. I'm just going to do nothing. Right. So that might be one way in which people self-sabotage. Another might be that they're a little bit afraid of the math that's involved. Like, they don't know, is this building going to be profitable? I don't know how to calculate a mortgage. So basically what this quiz does is it gets people to do a bit of a assessment. And then at the end, it spits out a result that says, okay, well, what is the main barrier that's stopping you from moving forward? And then it gives you sort of a couple of pointers. What can you do right now to overcome whatever barrier it is that you're facing and move ahead as an investor?
Okay, so the trends that you're seeing is, I don't know where to start. I'm afraid of the math. Are there any other trends that you're seeing?
Sometimes, and this was definitely the case for me, people are like maybe have a little bit of social anxiety or a little bit nervous about appearing ignorant in front of others.
Right.
Have some trouble networking. So that's another big one, that people get like a bit intimidated socially.
Right.
And then the fourth one, I'm just having a little bit of a blank.
I imagine time.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
Okay.
So people, with the amount of stuff that we take on, and a lot of us are working 9 to 5 and trying to then add something else on top of it. So for sure, people feel like they just don't have enough hours in a day to add on an extra responsibility or to do something to create a different, economic activity, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. I'm eager to take this quiz. And one last thing I want to touch on is this action plan that you're creating to put these exercises into motion and to get people moving towards deciding, whether real estate is for them or not in a mindful way. Is this all the content that's in the book, or where's this content coming from?
Yeah, so it's really, I wanted to do it as a bit of a companion to the book.
Okay.
So basically it's meant to be read with some of the chapters. So as you move through the book and digest some of the content, the action plan will refer you back to a specific chapter. Like, let's say, go and read the chapter on, be the hero of your own life. And then we'll have an exercise that goes along with it that forces you to put some of those ideas in action in relationship to yourself.
Okay.
So that's it. It's like almost a workbook that's meant to kind of go along with the book, but it's not a complete cookie cutter of it.
Okay, so there's bonus.
Yeah.
There's bonus content in that too.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Terrie. Thank you for everything that you are and everything that you do to move this whole idea of real estate investing and the mindfulness. Again, is not just about, if you're not in real estate, if you're not in landlording, I think there's tremendous value regardless. I mean, everyone, regardless of whether they're in real estate, it's important to know what what is active, what is transactional, and what is passive income, because real estate might not be for you, but there are other things out there that present themselves as an easy way of getting passive income. And I think that, Terrie, again, I did read the book. Terrie is straight up about all these things. There's no fluff in this book at all. And I think that, everybody should read this book. Everybody should have the opportunity to read it. So Terrie, tell us where we can find you.
Okay, so you can go on my website, terrieschauer.com, which you can obviously find a link to the book, but you can also find a blog that recaps some of these ideas, adds some additional information. There's also, what I think is a great recommended reading section that shows you where you can find resources on any of these topics, be it mindfulness or, life hacks or investment advice. So that's that. Then obviously social media, you can follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. That's pretty much it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you want to find out more about Blissonomics, you can go to blissonomics.com, and you can find us on the usual suspects, Facebook, LinkedIn, and not so crazy about Instagram. I'm still, and this is what I do for a living, right? And Instagram is just, I have to be okay with the facade of it. We'll see. But thanks again, Terrie, for joining us. And I'm so excited that the book is finally going to be launched on June 1st. And I'm excited for the people who are listening to this interview or watching this interview, that they have the chance to connect with you and not only read the book, but actually put the action plan into practice. So thanks again, Terrie, and everyone else. We will see you soon.
Thank you.